The template tools are the items in the template editor that help you create a useful and thorough template. The tools consist of buttons, checklists, and tables that will help you to build your template. On the left side of the chart template are a series of words: address, allergy, checklist, complaint, confidential, dictation, etc. These words are actually items you place into the template. The button above these words changes according to what you have highlighted in the tools list. To place an item into the template, you click once on that item in the tools list, and then click the button above the list. This will place the item where the cursor is in the template. Likewise, you can also double-click the word itself in the template list to add that item into the template. The following sections will walk you through adding and configuring the specific tools to a template. The Allergy button allows you to enter a patient's allergies into a template. It should be used if it seems likely an allergy would be associated with this template. Remember, you can always manually add an allergy button to a patient's chart instantly, even if it's not in the template. To add an allergy button to a template, you must first access the template list by clicking View and then Template List. Once the template list has been accessed, you need to select the applicable template you want to add an allergy button to. In the template editor, click Allergy in the Tools list to the left. Once Allergy is highlighted, make any spacing or other adjustments to the area where you want the allergy button to appear, and then position the cursor where you want the allergy button to appear in the template. After the cursor is blinking in the location you want the new allergy button to appear, click the corresponding button, and the allergy button will then appear in the template. Next, you can click the allergy button to configure the button's heading. In the Allergy Heading dialog, enter the heading for the allergy button you are adding, and then click the OK button. The heading text will then appear to the left of the allergy button. The heading will precede any configured allergies in the chart note. Checklists allow a list of items to be used and selected in a template. The list can be as long or as short as you choose. The only limitation is the number of cells in a checklist. A checklist can be up to 4 columns with up to 25 rows. In addition, a checklist can be one- or two-sided. This means that you can use a checklist to either create a list or to contain a list with normal, abnormal, or yes/no style items. The following sections will walk you through adding a checklist to a template and then configuring that checklist. To add a checklist to a template, you must first access the template list by clicking View and then Template List. Once the template list has been accessed, you need to select the applicable template you want to add the checklist to. In the template editor, click Checklist in the Tools list on the left. Once Checklist is highlighted, make any spacing or other adjustments to the area where you want the checklist to appear, and then position the cursor where you want the checklist to appear in the template. After the cursor is blinking in the location you want the new checklist to appear, click the corresponding button, and the checklist will then appear in the template. To begin configuring the checklist that you have just added, right-click the title bar of the checklist to access the Finding Checklist Properties dialog. When the Finding Checklist Properties dialog appears, you will see various fields and columns that allow you to configure what information will appear when checklist items are selected and removed in a chart note. To begin, in the heading field, enter the text you want to appear in the blue bar at the top of the checklist. This will be the name of the checklist. If you want the heading to appear in the patient note, be sure that the corresponding No Output box to the left is unchecked. If the No Output box is checked, the heading will not appear in the patient's chart note. If after the heading you want a carriage return to place text on the very next line, then after the heading text, enter \R. Next, in the After All Text field, enter any punctuation or text you want to appear after all text in the checklist. Typically this will be a period and/or a \n for creating a space between the checklist text and any other subsequent note text. Check the Use List Order option if you would like your text to print in the order that you see it in the checklist and will not be grouped depending on the normal-abnormal designation. When this option is selected, instead of a normal and an abnormal field, there will now only be an All Items field. If the Use List Order option is not selected and you enter normal and abnormal findings, all normals will be in one paragraph and all abnormals will be in another paragraph. You can then click into the Normal Items field and enter the beginning statement or text that will precede the normal items selected in the checklist. For example, you could enter "The patient denies," so that when normal items are selected in the checklist, the opening phrase, "The patient denies," will be followed by the text from the selected normal items. This phrase or sentence will appear in the chart note only once, and the other normal items selected will follow, separated by the information configured in the delimiters and conjunctions fields. In the corresponding delimiter and conjunction fields, you can enter the applicable delimiter and conjunction for the normal items field. A delimiter is the punctuation or text that will appear between each selected item in the checklist for the designated field. The most common delimiter would typically be a comma. However, if you want each item to be its own sentence, then use a period in this field. Another option would be to use the \r functionality. A conjunction is the punctuation or text that will appear before the last selected item in the checklist for the designated field. Common conjunctions would be and or. If you want each item to be its own sentence, then use a period in this field. Another option would be to use the \r functionality. You can then click into the Abnormal Items field and enter the beginning statement or text that will precede the abnormal item selected in the checklist. For example, you could enter "The patient reports," so that when abnormal items are selected in the checklist, the opening phrase, "The patient reports," will be followed by the text from that selected abnormal item. This phrase or sentence will appear in the chart note only once, and other abnormal items selected will be followed, separated by the information configured in the delimiters and conjunctions fields. You can enter the applicable delimiters and conjunctions for the abnormal item in a similar manner as they were entered for the normal item. Next, in the E&M field, you can enter a specific linking code that allows you to fill in information in the E&M guidelines when the particular item you are adding is selected in the chart note. You can then check the Enable Quick Normals, Enable All Normals checked, or the Neither radio button if applicable. When the Enable Quick Normals radio button is selected, a checkmark button will appear in the left-hand side of the title bar of the checklist. The checkmark is only visible when the checklist is collapsed. When this checkmark is clicked, the first normal finding in the checklist will automatically be selected. When the Enable All Normals Checked radio button is selected, a N button will appear in the left-hand side of the title bar of the checklist. When the N is clicked, all normal findings in the checklist will automatically be selected. This is typically used in the review of systems as a shortcut to bring in all normal statements. The N is only visible when the checklist is collapsed. Once the headings and applicable options have been configured as desired, you can enter the number of columns and rows for the checklist. The maximum number of columns is 4, and the maximum number of rows is 25. When you have finished configuring the checklist properties, click the OK button. To insert a finding into the checklist, simply right-click in the cell you want to insert a finding into, and then click Insert Finding. This opens the Finding dialog, allowing you to configure the finding properties. In the heading field of the Finding dialog, enter a finding name or text. Whatever is in this field is what will appear in the checklist, but will not print in the chart note. For our example, we will create an eyes finding. Click the Normal button to add a normal item into the finding. This is the item, phrase, or statement that will be displayed in the chart note when the first icon, or left side button, next to the heading is clicked. In the Edit field below, you can enter the text for the item, phrase, or sentence you want to add. For example, we could enter eyes, the patient denies any visual changes, eye disease injury, and blurred double vision. You can then repeat this process if there are multiple normal items. You can click the Abnormal button to add an abnormal item to the finding. This is the item, phrase, or statement that will be displayed in the chart note when the second icon, or right side button, next to the heading is clicked. In the edit field below, you can enter the text for the item, phrase, or sentence you want to add for the abnormal item. In our example, we are also going to incorporate the use of the Insert Edit button for embedding a list or series of statements in the form of a follow-up question. For example, we can enter eyes the patient reports and then add a list of symptoms that the patient reports with an embedded list. To do this, we need to click the Insert Edit button. Once the Insert Edit button is clicked, you will enter the New Follow-up Question dialog. In the New Follow-up Question dialog, you can create a numeric part that allows you to configure a numeric range within a particular option, or a list part that allows you to create an alphanumeric list of items to choose from within the finding option. When creating a numeric part to insert into a finding option, you have the ability to enter a label, and then you can configure a minimum value and a maximum value to determine the numeric range, as well as the initial value that will default when the numeric option is selected. This is typically the average or most common value. Likewise, you can set the number of decimal places for the counter. When creating a label part to insert into a finding option, you have the ability to enter a label to alert the user what the list will comprise, various list items that can be inserted and removed, sort multiple list items, allow multi-select, allow free text, as well as configure the items to appear between items, before the penultimate item, and after the end of the list. For our example, we will create an embedded list that allows the user to select a number of symptoms that the patient is reporting regarding their eyes. Therefore, in the label field, we'll enter symptoms to indicate what the list will contain. Next, we can add the items in our list. If we click into the item field, we can enter double vision and then click the Insert Item button. We can then repeat this process for other items we want in the list. You can remove or edit an item from the list by highlighting that item and then clicking the Remove and Edit button. If editing, you would click the Insert item when finished. After all of the applicable items have been entered, you can click the Sort button to put them in alphabetical order. Likewise, we will check the Multi-Select option so that the user will be able to select multiple items in the list. When finished, we can click the OK button. In the Finding dialog, you will see the new entry. To edit an inserted list or follow-up question, you must click anywhere in between the brackets and then click the Insert Edit button. If you are not within the brackets, the system will think you want to add another new option list or follow-up question. You can then add any additional verbiage to the statement as needed. Or you can insert another follow-up question by utilizing the Insert Edit button. For example, we could add to the current entry the text, "but denies," and then create a similar list as before using the Insert Edit button. Once multiple entries are listed, you can modify the position of a finding item by highlighting the applicable item and using the arrows to the right to modify the position. Likewise, if you want the findings to appear in alphabetical order, you can click the Sort button. To delete an item within a list, highlight that item and then click the Delete button. After all of the normal and abnormal findings have been entered and configured, you can click into the E&M field and enter a specific linking code that allows you to fill in information in the E&M guidelines when the particular item you are adding is selected in the chart note, if applicable. Next, you can click the Tag button to search for and locate a result finding if you want to link the finding to a result finding that will be viewable in the History tab of the patient's chart. Once any tags are entered as desired, click the Format tab. Here you can specify the particular symbol for any normal items, as well as the symbol for any abnormal items. When finished configuring the finding, you can click the OK button. You can then repeat this process to add any other findings into the checklist. A label is a cell item that acts as a separator for a group of cells in a checklist. Labels cannot be clicked on to perform any functionality, but instead work as markers to group various checklist findings into categories. To add a label to the checklist, right-click the cell you want to place a label in, and then click Insert Label. In the Label dialog, enter the label name you want to appear in the selected cell. When finished, click the OK button. Once the label is configured, you can then enter applicable findings under that label. The sort function allows you to pick a specific cell in the checklist and to sort the various checklist items above that particular point. Be aware, when sorting items in the checklist, that both findings and labels above the specified cell will be sorted. To sort the various checklist items, right-click the cell you want to sort to, and then click Sort Up to here. The various items in the cell above the cell you are sorting from will then appear in alphabetical order. To edit a finding in a checklist, simply right-click the finding you want to edit, and then click Edit Properties. You will then be taken to the finding dialog for that item and can add or edit the information for the finding as needed. When finished, click the OK button. To delete a finding or a label from a checklist, right-click the cell you want to delete and then click Clear Item. This will remove the finding or label from the list. You have the ability to move various items within the checklist to an empty cell, or, in a similar manner, you can swap the cell position with another checklist item. To move a particular item into an empty cell, simply left-click that item and drag it to the empty cell you want to move it to. Once the empty cell is highlighted, release the mouse button, and that item will move from the previous cell to the new cell. To swap positions with another cell item, simply left-click the item and then drag that item to the cell containing the item you want to swap positions, and then release the mouse button. The items will then switch positions. The Confidential button allows users with the proper privileges to enter and view confidential information for a patient. Any confidential information in a chart note can only be entered and viewed by users that have an access granted level for the confidentiality privilege. When a user who does not have access to confidential information opens a chart that contains confidential information, that section appears blank to the user. If that user clicks the confidential button within the note, nothing will happen. To add a confidential button to a template, you must first access the template list by clicking View and then Template List. Once the template list has been accessed, you need to select the applicable template you want to add the confidential button to. In the template editor, click Confidential in the Tools list on the left. Once Confidential is highlighted, make any spacing or other adjustments to the area where you want the confidential button to appear, and then position the cursor where you want the confidential button to appear in the template. After the cursor is blinking in the location you want the new confidential button to appear, click the corresponding button and the confidential button will then appear in the template. This concludes this section of the ChartMaker Clinical Template Editing training video. To replay this video, click the Replay button. If you'd like to replay a particular section of the video, you can click the appropriate entry in the table of contents to the left. To continue with the next part of the template editing training video, or to view a previous part, click the applicable link on our website.